the 29th of December 2023, the Republic of South Africa arraigned the state of Israel before the International Court of Justice, otherwise known as the World Court at The Hague, for alleged genocide and crimes against humanity in Gaza. And the ongoing conflict in Gaza has lingered from the 7th of October last year up to the moment, and the Chinese news agency Xinhua reports presently that there are over 22,000, close to 22,500 deaths in Gaza of Palestinians. And this forms the subject of our discussion today on deepening the conversation. Our segment of conversation with Azu, published on the back page of Leadership newspaper. Our column today is titled In Pursuit of the Last Hamas. Azu, the award-winning columnist, is joining us on Zoom live from Lagos to discuss some of the issues he has raised in his column. You're welcome to the conversation, Azu.
Thanks for having me, Julius.
All right, let's start this way. Do you really think if other countries were to back South Africa in the decision it has taken, that perhaps this will bring the conflict that has raged for about 3 months now and counting to a quicker end in the Middle East?
I mean, sure, to answer your question directly, another voice of reason will obviously help to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu's government to stop the war. But if I might just dial back a bit to your intro, but what South Africa has done, of course, is to file a case against Israel at the World Court, or the International Court of Justice, which is one of the 6 main organs of the UN. It has actually not arraigned. It's not going to be. It's not its job to arraign. It has filed a complaint of genocide, genocide, correctly, and. I think that from that point on, of course, the World Court would obviously be obliged to look at the merits of the complaints of South Africa against Israel. But to answer your question, to go back to your question, I think any additional voice of reason would be quite helpful in hopefully putting pressure on Netanyahu to stop the war.
All right. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, perhaps what South Africa is doing now would have been done by Nigeria. Do you think Nigeria is weakening or slackening in its foreign policy and diplomacy?
Well, foreign policy, obviously, among other things, is also a reflection of the state of internal affairs of any country at any particular point in time. So obviously the challenges, internal challenges that Nigeria has been having for quite a number of years now, limited the capacity of Nigeria to respond the way that it used to respond in the past. But there are also common histories, if you like, between South Africa, between what is going on, between South Africa's lead role as it is now, you know, and between South Africa's lead role and the experience of the Palestinians. You remember that under apartheid South Africa, the blacks in South Africa who owned the country were were oppressed and treated with such disdain. And so it's quite obvious that South Africa perceives that same affinity with Palestinians in the experience that they are going through. So South Africa's response is not unusual, it's not coincidental. It's also an expression of the common history and common humanity and heritage that the histories of both countries obviously share. And I think that it's also in response to that. And if you also look at apart from that commonality of historical precedent, if you also look at both countries, you would find a significant number also of people of Palestinian or Arab roots also forming a significant part of the South African population. So all sorts of reasons, of course, are coming into play in South Africa's response. But I do not think that the fact that Nigeria has not been as active or has not been as forceful should prevent it from, or prevent the EU or other African countries from lining up behind South Africa's principled position on the war in Gaza.
I would like to add this. Israel wants to root out Hamas, and Hamas is a declared objective of Hamas to liberate the land of Palestine, no matter how long it takes. Is there going to be an end to this conflict?
Good question. I think ultimately there will be an end, but what sort of end your guess is the jury's out on what sort of end we desire. I think the sort of end that most well-meaning people would like after so many decades of conflict is an end that will allow the lion and the lamb, so to speak, to lie side by side. And that's the two-state solution. And it's been a subject of conversation in the UN. The UN has made a resolution decades of that. And I think that the preponderance of reason across the world is that both countries should be able to find a common ground to live by side by side under a two-state solution. I think that that's the desire, and I believe that both countries should be able to work towards that.
All right. And a quick follow-up on this two-state solution, which appears to be, appears to be objectionable to both sides, Palestine and the Israelis. Hamas is a political group, and Hamas was popularly elected. So could there be another middle ground if both sides find a two-state solution not acceptable?
Well, I do not think of any condition under which both parties, because the two-state solution is not just something that is coming up now. It's a well-considered view of over decades. And well, yes, I mean Hamas indeed has Hamas has not done well for the people of Palestine. And Hamas's extremist view, of course, Hamas has tried to justify that the sort of oppression under which the Palestinians are living is not acceptable. Fair point. But that also does not, in my view, justify what happened on the 7th of October. That was so wrong. That attack on innocent civilians and innocent people. Most of the people who died in the October 7 attack that was not a military attack. And so that's wrong. But yes, I mean, in most conflicts, the parties will often take extreme positions, but will have to work towards a common ground. Israel, especially under Netanyahu, also. Netanyahu has pandered to the extreme right of Israel. He himself is an extremist on his own. But worse for him and worse for Israel and worse for the world. He has pandered quite obviously to the sentiments of the extreme right. And that has not augured well for peace at all. And the same sort of thing. So if two wrongs don't make a right, you don't add a third. And there must be a possibility of finding a common ground in a two-state solution. And I'm hoping that the US cannot just stand idly by and not put pressure on Netanyahu and on Israel. The same way I believe the Arabs are fixing on Hamas to find a common ground in a two-state solution and for the world to start working towards that as quickly as possible.
And finally, amidst the massive human tragedy in Gaza, the Western media especially is trying to frame the conflict like an Israeli resistance against terror. What do you think the media isn't doing right in this circumstance?
Well, I think it may not be totally correct to take the entire Western media as a single unit and then dismiss. I think that there are also variants of the Western media that feel obliged to look at the situation in Gaza more objectively. But you also know that the media, more often than not, is a reflection of the sentiments of the principal owners of the platform. So I'm sure that some persons who also have been watching Al Jazeera will express a similar sentiment that Al Jazeera has also, if you like, been biased in its coverage of the conflict. But I think that this is not really about, I mean, it's about humanity. It's about the scale and the scale of human tragedy that we have watched through this many years. I mean, the number dead is, we're not even numbering those who are caught in the rubble as, you know, that about 8,000 people are unaccounted for, you know, the number. So it's not, I think that every journalist covering this should be guided by the cardinal principles of objectivity, of fairness, and of justice in the coverage of this conflict. It's not a time to take sides or to be partisan. It's a time to stand for humanity.
All right, it's a time to stand for humanity. That is where we bring this conversation to an end. Conversation with Azu is published on the back page of Leadership newspaper and syndicated in other online platforms, much more than sometimes we bother to mention to you. You can also find it in Clarín of Argentina. You can find it and adapted in Daily Maverick of South Africa and published and adapted in the Graphic of Ghana. Please visit our site, azuishekone.com. Like, subscribe, share our content. Thank you very much for joining the conversation. Thanks for coming on the show, Azu.
It's been my pleasure being here doing this on Zoom for 3 weeks. Hopefully next week, by God's grace, I'll be able to join you on site. Thanks very much, and thanks to the guys also backstage. Bye for now. Thank you.